Hey there, this is bethechangeyouwantedu presenting on RtI Information and Implementation in the Classroom. If you are viewing this video and you are not from Tumblr, I just wanted to give you a background and say that we are a bunch of teachers who met each other online who decided to put up professional development videos for one another, as well as many documents in a Google Drive folder. This way we are networking with one another across the country, and some of us are networking across the world, which is pretty cool. But if you would like more information on it, you can view our channel and probably check out some of our Tumblrs. Alright, what is RtI? I do want to give you a heads up before I start this presentation and say that I will be presenting on the basics of RtI. I was very unfamiliar with RtI when I was in college, even when I was a student teacher. I kept hearing a lot of jargon that didn't make sense to me. I was very confused about it. So if you already use RtI in your school, then you probably know a great majority of this information. However, if you don't, stay tuned. Alright, RtI stands for Response to Intervention. The word intervention can be a little bit off-putting, especially to parents who hear that word and hear their child involved with that word. I do my best to try to educate the parents in my classroom about what RtI is. Why are we using it in the classroom? What is its purpose? RtI is a research-based model that is used in the classroom to ensure that you are providing every student with the interventions that they need to grow as a learner. What that means is basically what you're probably already doing in your classroom. You're pulling students, you're seeing where they're weak, where they're strong, who needs what at what point in time. All students are included in the RtI model. That means 100% of your classroom will be in one of the 3 tiers, which we'll talk about later. Alright, I've broken it down into 2 separate groups because RtI can look a little bit different depending on what grade level you teach. If you are in K through 3, RtI is more like a preventative technique to ensure that students don't fall behind in grade level math or reading. That means that these students are getting their foundations at this age, and that we need to make sure that they are getting exactly what they need when they need it. If we see a student struggling, we are going to make sure that we help them so they don't go on to the higher grades and continue to struggle. However, if that does so happen, we move on up to grades 4 and up, where RtI is a framework that is used to help rescue those students who did fall through the cracks. No matter what kind of teaching you put in and how much effort you put in and how great of a teacher you are, you're always going to have students who do struggle with this material. So I don't want you to feel like you're a failure if you keep trying all these interventions and they're just not working. That's a part of teaching, it's a part of life, and it's going to happen every single year. So stay calm. Alright, the goal is to basically give every single student the opportunity to succeed and master the skill. That means you are tailoring their instruction perfectly toward them. I got much of this information from this video linked below. There is a copy of this keynote in my Google Drive folder where you will be able to actually access that link. Alright, a key part of RtI is data analysis, and that, if you are a college student or you are almost student teaching, sounds like a giant scary word because you have never done this before. And that just basically means that your district will provide you with some sort of benchmarking assessment system. They're either going to put into place Ames Web for math or reading, or DIBELS or CBMs, MClass, Scholastic Math and Reading Inventories, or STAR. Now, I'm not familiar with a few of those that I've listed there. However, I did do some research and see that those are used indeed for RtI purposes. In my school, we do use Ames Web. We use the reading and math, as well as map testing. And map testing doesn't have a ton to do with RtI. However, we do form our data into our 3 tiers, and I'll get to that later again. This data will provide information on which students need more intensive interventions. Now, when you get this data, after you've benchmarked your students, you will be able to clearly see who is where and when. If you don't know what benchmarking is, that means that you are testing students at least 3 times a year and receiving data on their growth. Like I said, this is where tiers come in. That's a very scary word. It was very scary to me. I wasn't very comfortable with it, but trust me, don't panic. You will be just fine. All right. Like I said, don't be afraid of this terminology. Students will be placed into one of 3 tiers that you will see a picture of on the next slide. The majority of your students will be in Tier 1. The vast majority of your general education students will fall into there. That just means they're going to get the good old curriculum. You're just going to keep teaching how you're teaching. All right, here is my pyramid. Now, I did make this graphic for you guys because there are tons and tons and tons of these graphics online. If you just Google the RtI pyramid or the RtI triangles, you're going to see so many of them. However, I created this one because if you look at where the green Tier 1 is, the Tier 3 and Tier 2 triangles are within the green, and the green kind of runs around the perimeter of them. That's really important to pay attention to, and I will get to that later on. If you look, green is the largest, that's Tier 1, where 85-ish, it might change, could be different for you, to 90% of your students will land there. Tier 2 will have 5-ish to 10-ish% of students landing there, and then Tier 3 will be your smallest triangle. Some years you might not have any students who are in Tier 3, and that's awesome. I applaud you. I'm very jealous of you. All right, what do these tiers look like? Here we go. For Tier 1, these students receive the general education curriculum, so you're just teaching plain old reading when you're teaching reading to them. This does not mean that you do not need to motivate them. These students also need motivation. They need goals. They need you to cheer them on. They need to know that this is important. They are still benchmarked, so every single student in your class will probably take a test in the fall. They'll take one in the winter, and they'll take one in the spring, and then you can measure their growth from there. Just like Ames Web. All right, now we've got Tier 2. We've got these students still receiving the general education, and they should not, I cannot stress this enough, they should not be pulled for other interventions while any curriculum is being taught. This means that your reading specialist cannot come in during your reading time and pull these students. These students are still to receive the reading curriculum just as the Tier 1 students. You need whole group. You need to be teaching every single student in your classroom the curriculum that you have. You don't want them to miss that key curriculum because then you're not doing them any favors. Not at all. Tier 2 students are considered at risk. You don't want them to drop to Tier 3. You don't want them going any lower than they already are. You want to definitely pull that yellow triangle into that green triangle by the end of the year. That's obviously our main goal. Does it always happen? No, but you've got the data to prove that you've made an effort. Tier 2 is where small group interventions take place. We analyze the data to form the appropriate groups. The data can come from anywhere. That would be a whole separate video on how to analyze data and how to form these small groups, but we're sticking with RtI for today. All right, Tier 3. These students still receive the general education curriculum. However, I do want to mention these students may have gone through the RtI process before, and they may have interventions already in place for them. If this so happens, these students might not receive the general ed curriculum. For example, my school is a Read 180 school. I had a few students who were in my class last year pulled out of my reading curriculum to go with the special ed teacher and participate in the Read 180 Scholastic program. So, if you have a student who's in red, who's not in a special ed program, they stick with you, they still receive your regular curriculum. If they are pulled, you don't need to worry about teaching them the regular curriculum because they are getting something separate from a separate teacher, most likely in a smaller environment that is more tailored to them. All right, these students receive tailored one-on-one interventions. Now this goes for everybody who's in Tier 3. Whether or not they're in SPED or they're in your classroom, they're receiving one-on-one with you. They have tailored interventions. You have really looked at these students' data. You have found out where they need the most help, and you are pushing interventions on them to make sure that they are getting everything that they need. All right, Tier 2 and Tier 3 together. These students receive intensive interventions. Interventions must be documented. I cannot stress this enough. You have to write down what you're doing with these students. If you don't write it down, if you don't record it, you are wasting your own time and you are wasting the students' time. I have a little section about documentation later on, so if you don't know what that is, keep listening. Now, I have been told that the classroom teacher or the SPED teacher must provide the interventions for these students. Many of us have teachers' aides in the classroom that once upon a time were allowed to give these interventions to these Tier 2 and Tier 3 students. I myself have been told that I need to be giving these interventions, I need to be pulling these small groups, and I need to be meeting with these kids, and that the teacher's aide should have another job or another group in the classroom at that time. However, some of us work with some very, very, very good teachers' aides. They are amazing. They know these students, they've worked with them for years, and if they feel comfortable and you feel comfortable, I don't necessarily see that being an issue, but I would definitely check with your school, see what their policies are, see what your team members are thinking, and check with them before you allow a teacher's aide to be doing these interventions with your students. Keep in mind that these teachers' aides also have several other classrooms or several other students that they also have to service, and it's not always the easiest to remember who needs what when, but you're with these students all day, so you do know that. All right, important to remember, these tiers are fluid. Students can move in and out of these tiers at any point throughout the year. You can have students in Tier 1 who drop to Tier 2. You can have students who are in Tier 2 hopefully move to Tier 1. That would be excellent for you. Or, in worst case scenario, you can have students who you've been doing tons of interventions for in Tier 2 drop to Tier 3 no matter what you keep doing. Remember that interventions can begin at any time throughout the year. So if you had a student who was in Tier 1 in green in the beginning of the school year and they have dropped to Tier 2, you can start those interventions immediately. Just make sure that you document them, and all that means is put the data on there, record what you're doing. And here's a little section about that. Documentation of interventions can be the most difficult part. It is the most painful part. None of us like paperwork. It's awful. But if you get a system down, it's pretty easy. You want to find a standard document that includes the intervention and the time and stick with it. Don't change these documents. You are going to make more work for yourself. Find one document, be as concise as possible, write down what you've got. You're going to be able to give this information out when you're in meetings with reading specialist, principal, whoever you're meeting with. You're going to be able to spill all of this information out. So just make sure that you're writing it down. Be professional about it. Don't write down that you did flashcards with a student on October 5th and leave it at that. Be professional. Remember that you have to write this stuff down. I was very, very, very bad at it when I first started. I'm getting better at it. A lot of the documents that I have received through the school aren't the best to work with, and I have definitely looked at them, tailored them to what I need, and then I've kind of transferred that over to what our district expects from us. Find out what your school's intervention team is looking for and create your own document if you have to. Meet with that reading specialist. Meet with whoever is in charge of this. Find out what they're looking for and make sure you're doing it. Even if you're a first-year teacher, be on top of this because you're doing this for your students. You're not doing this for the team. You're not doing this for the school. You are doing this solely for the students. As a teacher, you are already providing these interventions in the classroom on a daily basis. You just have to write them down now. If you're a teacher, you are passionate about this. You know what you're doing. You know why you're doing it. You just have to put the pen to the paper. All right. I did leave a blank here because technically in my school, I have 6 weeks of documented interventions to determine if they're working or not. I don't know if that's necessarily the same for all schools, so I did put you must have blank weeks of documented interventions to determine if they're working or not. I would stick with 6. That's a month and a half. Your student might have a terrible 3 weeks in there. Something might be going wrong for them. So you want to make sure that you have a solid 6 weeks, a good amount of time to see did they make growth or not. All right, now, your interventions, you're putting them in, you're putting a lot of hard work in, you're planning these times, you're pulling these students, and now they're not working. Now what do you do? Look at the progress monitoring. What are you missing? Is there anything in there? Consider trying different interventions. Change them up. You don't have to stick with them. Nobody says that you have to keep doing this. Change them up. See what works. Are there any aspects in play here now? Seating arrangements can be a huge one. Does your student have also some sort of behavior issue? Do they need some sort of token reward? Do they need some